essentially what positive psychology is, we've studied a lot about what's wrong with people. The founding of positive psychology is let's study what's right with people so that we can encourage and grow and develop more of that so that people can lead more fulfilling lives.
What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome to the AlignUs podcast, a transformative journey into the worlds of wellness and philanthropy. I'm your host, Dr. Nikhil Sharma, and I'm so grateful to have you guys here with us today. This week's podcast is on character strengths and virtues, and we're really lucky today to have a special guest, Marcy Willis, who is a master and speaker coach and who studied and got her master's in positive psychology with one of the founders of positive psychology, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Welcome, Marcy, and I'm so grateful to have you here on the podcast with us today.
Thanks, Nick. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
For those who don't know, Marcy is actually my executive coach and has been with me on this journey from the beginning. And I'm just so grateful for all of her teachings that has helped put me in the position to be right in front of you guys, having this podcast, creating AlignUs. None of that would be possible without her guidance. And just thank you.
Well, just creating the space, right? That's what coaching is creating the space for people to come and reconnect with what matters to them. And like we're going to talk about today, a lot of that begins with, what are your values? What are your strengths? What are your interests? Are you living aligned with those?
That's right. And, I had this vision and I'm just a newcomer. I just knew that I wanted to provide positivity to individuals that were maybe suffering from a decline of their mental health, because these days that's a big issue in the United States and really across the world. We had a stat where 1 out of every 4 individual is suffering from some sort of mental health issue. And so I wanted to put out things that would help them heal from that issue that was going, and then create a positive momentum. And in my time of transitioning from being a physician to being a tech entrepreneur, I fell in love with this field called positive psychology. I didn't know what that term was, but I apparently was exuding all of the characteristics of being in positive psychology, which includes emotions or positive emotions, which includes character strengths, just having a positive mindset. I didn't know that there was a whole field dedicated to that. And by fate and by chance, my executive coach happened to be her master's in positive psychology. It was truly a blessing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, because oftentimes in coaching, we start with reconnecting people to values, strengths, and all of those things. And so when we were doing that with you, it became very clear, like your purpose and all of that. It's like, I just thought everything that he wants to do and that he's living for and stands for and wants to do more of are completely aligned with the positive psychology literature.
That's right.
So yeah. I mean, you've been on the front lines of that as a doctor, and the kind of work that you were doing in terms of, human suffering and what happens, when we're not living our lives on purpose.
That's right. That was one of the things that helped me form AlignUs, was being in the hospital, being a physician, and seeing what can happen when your mental health deteriorates. What happens when we are not aware of what our body is telling us, because it's true. Like the book says, the body does keep the score. And oftentimes we put others in front of our own needs. And what happens with that is that our health starts deteriorating, and we often don't go to the doctor, or we try to escape the pain that's in our head with different types of addictions. And all that leads to is your physical health deteriorating. We tend to eat more. We develop diabetes. If we have, addictions, we drink and our liver starts failing. So all that goes back to mindset. right? And what I started studying was that people who had a positive mindset, they ended up living longer lives, more fulfilling lives. And, something that I wanted to make aware for those out there that never really could put two and two together, how our mindset helps us create the lives that we want to achieve and prevents us from having poor outcomes and going to the hospital for issues that they could have likely prevented if they had a positive mindset. So
Yeah.
what is this positive psychology? What does that term mean?
Yeah, well, like you're talking about a positive mindset. First, to set the record straight, positive mindset doesn't mean that, we're walking around all rainbows and unicorns all of the time, or like happy, happy. It's funny. Csikszentmihalyi was actually one of the, had a lot of gravitas and, always thinking and serious. But essentially what positive psychology is, we've studied a lot and we talk a lot about what's wrong with people. The founding of positive psychology by Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania and by Csikszentmihalyi, who was at the University of Chicago and then Claremont Graduate University, is let's study what's right with people so that we can encourage and grow and develop more of that so that people can lead more fulfilling lives. Let's like talk about happiness, but happiness is really, there are different paths to happiness. And so I'd like to talk about it more as, fulfillment. What is a good life? And that's different for each person based on values, based on strengths, based on our interests. And so positive psychology is about studying and knowing what we're good at, what we value, why we're here, what makes us happy, self-knowledge, self-awareness to live a better life.
That's right. Because before, psychology was the study of when your mental health, was in decline, whether it's
That's
depression,
right.
whether it's bipolar, whether it's schizophrenia, everything that had to do with what was wrong with your brain. And then how do we get that from being where it was to just a baseline of normal, right? And so, but there was no discussion about how do you go from like that baseline to really emotional fulfillment and
Thriving.
enhancing your brain activity and thriving. Beautiful word. And thriving, because there has to be a skill set or a path that leads us down that way to achieve those goals.
Yeah, how do we do it?
Yeah.
And we're not taught that in school. Although
No.
I think now more these days with, like the kind of thing that you're doing and just what we know about social emotional learning, and also because of the contributions of positive psychology. I mean, you hear a lot more about, connecting people. I feel like there's more public knowledge about strengths, about values, about living these things than maybe when I was coming up. Sometimes we naturally find it, and sometimes other conditioning factors, family, society, culture, tell us what we should be doing.
Right.
And that's not
Exactly.
always in alignment with what our real values and strengths are. So
Right.
one of the things I think I shared with you before, because I've never forgotten it. There are certain like pearls that would drop from Csikszentmihalyi's mouth. And one of them that I remember clearly is successful people are good at finding the right environments for themselves. And what did he mean by that? What he meant was finding the environments where your values are being lived and expressed, where you're using your strengths and you're being challenged just enough in terms of your skills related to those strengths that you're experiencing high levels of flow. You're learning, you're growing, you're actualizing your potential. And if those things are in place, if you're in environments where that is encouraged and where those things are happening, you're probably going to be more fulfilled, more happy.
I love that, and that reminds me of, if you are aware of what your character strengths are and you identify your values, the actions you take from that foundation, you will manifest powerful realities. It's just, it's something that I just learned when you had, kind of taken me under your wing. And I remember our first meeting was, Nick, all right, before we get to, align us and determining the mission and the vision and the values of your company, we need to sit down and let's go over and find out, what are your character strengths? And you kind of sent me to the Viia Institute. It was a great exercise. And it was like, all of a sudden, I found out that, my top character strengths were, honesty, gratitude, appreciation of beauty. My number one was hope, and I think those that probably know me can sense that. But, there's a power to actually using those words,
naming something that maybe you kind of know more
right,
or less, or you've been, but really being able to name it and understand it. Yeah, there's a lot of power and just knowledge and wisdom. Now, okay, for these things, my appreciation of beauty, how well am I living that in my personal life? Well, if I were rating it on a scale of 1 to 5, okay, a 4. How well am I living that in the work that I do? Oh, a 1 or a 2. Well, what does that say? How might I be able to, what would a 4 look like in that at work? Even within the work that I have right now, maybe there are ways to better align what I currently do with that strength. And if not, and if there are a number of strengths that I'm not able to express or grow in the work that I'm doing, I would bet money that you're not totally fulfilled or happy in what you're doing. And so then there's a path to, like, okay, now I know maybe what I have to move the needle on to
right.
feel a little better.
That's right. Like, this is what's the beauty about this personal growth journey and self-discovery, is discovering first who you are. And you're doing that by discovering what your character strengths are, discovering what your values are. Okay, so my character strengths are that I am very hope, I have zest, I have appreciation of beauty, I believe in honesty, and I am very grateful for things that are in my life. Now, when I think about those 5 character strengths, how does that align with all my relationships? How do those strengths align with my relationships? Are those being met in each and every single one of them in some sort of way? How is that aligned with my work? Because we spend 60% of our lives working, at least 2 or 3 of those character strengths need to be exhibited at work at a 4 or 5 level in order for me to be able to be fulfilled,
I
right?
think it's
So
really important in life, but in work, because that's the thing. That's part of why I went into positive organizational psychology. We can find purpose, we can find meaning in the work that we do. It can be a great actualizer of our potential. But sometimes people, we just take career paths or jobs based on random factors, on what our family wants us to do, or just where we land, rather than having some self-awareness and knowledge of these things, and being able, to try to move ourselves in those directions, so that we can be, that's what Csikszentmihalyi, Seligman, all of the founders of positive psychology. It's how do we make life worth living for people? How do we give them meaning?
that's right. And it's like you hit the nail on the head. It's a lot of our values were once established for us by our parents, by societal norms, by our brothers, our sisters, growing up, and they're like, you have to live a certain way. You have to be, in the South Asian community, you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer, you have to be a computer scientist. So that completely eliminated one energy source for me altogether. Like my focus had to only be on those fields. I could not even, the energy source of being creative was not, applicable for me, even though clearly I had a creative side that was budding inside me,
That appreciation for beauty, which is often a part of creativity and the arts. And
Exactly. I was unfortunately, I wouldn't say unfortunately, but I am very grateful to become a physician, because that is what has helped me lead to where I'm at now. I just was giving kind of an example of how society controls sometimes the way we think and our thoughts. And once we realize and take more ownership of our life, and that starts with recreating or creating a foundation, we are able to be more powerful and intentional about how we want to live it, what we want to do, and not worry about any other individual around us, because our life and our journey is solely ours. It's unique to just us. And that's what people, when they understand and realize that, can make beautiful things happen in their life.
yeah, one of the things I think about sometimes is just how really every individual on this planet has won the DNA lottery, right? I mean, how many, you're a doctor, how many ways, how many possible permutations for how DNA can combine? And it combined to express you. And that, like the beauty of that and the uniqueness that every individual has, based on, there are a lot of different things you could have become in terms of genetic expression. And there you are.
And I bet, if every person in this world took the Viia Institute and figured out their character strengths, I bet you the top 5 would be largely different for almost each individual, that combination, across the world. And that's what makes us, uniquely us, is the fact that we are different. We are meant to lead our own life. And so when we stop comparing ourselves to others and focusing all that energy on ourselves, we'll naturally blossom. There's an energy that forms around us that's radiant, that's abundant, and that will bring in everything we could ever dream of. And so I just love character strengths, and I feel it's foundational for each human to understand what they are.
Value strengths absolutely are. That was one of the big takeaways from I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the positive psychology, but it's, as you said, foundational and fundamental. Know thyself, know your values, know your strengths, know your interests, and grow and develop those. The other thing I was thinking about was the concept of overused strengths, when our strengths also become our obstacles, because that can happen too. In some ways, you being a doctor, like you were saying, and this happens, I think, for a lot of health professionals, and there's a crisis in healthcare, not just mental wellness in America, but also in healthcare, because you can have, for example, okay, I have a lot of empathy, I have a value around social justice and making sure that everyone has access to care, and I'm a doctor and I'm I'm just, even those schedules you all have, but doing, giving. And who takes care of the doctors? When do you pour into yourself? And if you're just giving in that way, it's the concept of overused strengths. Now I'm doing so much of that to the exclusion of honoring other things. And then what happens?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting things. I never really thought about that, like overusing our strengths. But
well.
that's why everything is about balance. It's we ourselves know when we are committing too much of our time and energy into one specific field or focus. And so when you become more aware of yourself, you're able to recognize those patterns, and then pull your energy back from that, because likely another part of your life is suffering because of the amount of energy you're putting into one field or work. So that's really insightful and a good thing to remember. Hey guys, for more resources on today's topic, character strengths and values, including our blog, make sure to check out our website at www.alignusworld.com. And make sure to follow us on all of our social media pages on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube with the handle at AlignUsWorld. And make sure to energetically donate to our YouTube channel by hitting the like and subscribe button. Now back to our podcast. So what are character strengths, and how are they different from like talents or skills?
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about the VIA, since that's the one that you took. And of course, there are different, ways to know your strengths. Assessments is one of them, something like the VIA, or there's even, strengths finders. I do leadership coaching, done thousands of 360s, and, in 360s, getting feedback from people, you understand your strengths. Personality, if you do a workplace big five or Hogan or any of these and understand more about your personality, personalities have strengths. But the VIA in particular, what Chris Peterson at the University of Michigan and Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania developed this. And what they did with their research is they looked across cultures at a lot of philosophical traditions, religions, literature. I mean, they like turned every stone looking for the universals in what is good character, what are virtues, and they found a lot of alignment, a lot of for certain virtues. Wisdom is something that is valued in most cultures, knowledge and wisdom. Courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and so these are they call them virtues, things that in most cultures across the globe we all as human beings universally see as virtues, things to aspire to. What's good in human beings? There's a range of what we human beings are, from the very worst to the very best, and we all have it in us. But what are these more virtue things? And then within those, they strength. So for example, within the virtue of wisdom, that curiosity contributes to wisdom, our desire to learn, to know, to understand others and the world around us. These are all things that help contribute to building knowledge and wisdom. Courage, that integrity, being true to who we are and what we think is right takes courage often.
Sure.
So that's how they identified those.
Right, and I guess they came up with a total of 24 character strengths.
Yeah,
Right.
24 character strengths embedded within 6 kind of virtues. So those virtues would be the kind of strengths, and then the character strengths that make up that virtue.
And what I thought was brilliant about the way they approached this was that, when you take that test and you find out your top 5, character strengths, you also see where the rest of your character strengths lies, and you'll clearly see your number 24 character strengths. But what's great about positive psychology is, and what really resonated with me is that instead of us focusing on what we are not maybe so great at, let's pour more into your character strengths that you are good at, because those are like your superpowers, like those 5 character strengths. When I hear them reverberated back to me, I feel like, a vibration that goes through my body that I can resonate with. I'm like, yeah, I am hopeful. Yes, I am grateful on, things in my life. I do have an appreciation of beauty, so why don't I continue to use those strengths that I already have built in me innately and apply that to my relationships, apply that to my career, and apply that in my everyday being, instead of focusing on my characteristics that are like number 20, 21, because I already have something that's unique and special.
Yeah, and the idea that, like, I think about this in the workplace, this happens a lot, where someone will be in a role and they're not doing well. It doesn't feel good to not do things well. And sometimes it's just that, we don't know enough to be able to do it well, or we haven't had enough practice in the skill. But sometimes it's just that these really aren't things that we're strong or even interested in. And so you can take that same individual and then you can put them in a different environment, in a different role, and they start thriving. They do really well. And so I think, especially in instances like that, like when you don't know yet exactly what your strengths are, and maybe you're in situations or environments where they're not being actualized, they're not being developed, they're not being used, it doesn't feel great. So
That's
there's
right.
something about, like you were saying, the body tells you, the body knows, the body doesn't lie. And so, you're trying, and you might get okay at some of these things that aren't strengths. But if you work on strengths, you probably will move more toward mastery. And that's motivating. That's inspiring. That's, Maslow's actualization of our potential as human beings. We all have different potentials. I mean, many things are universal and across different people, but we all have different ones. And so knowing them for yourself so that you can put yourself in those roles, in those organizations, in those places where you are thriving.
Right. And I just think about how growing up, I felt like I had to conform in some sort of way to fit what was around me. And I always felt uncomfortable, or I knew there was something in me that was telling me that you have something else that you need to be doing. But oftentimes we neglect our own intuition because we've been told by our parents or by society that, no, don't do that. That's not what you're meant to do. The odds of you even doing that is 1 out of a billion. Do you think that you're capable of creating a company or becoming a music star or an actor or whatever you may be? Just stick down the line of whatever you're doing right now, whether it's being a physician like it was for myself. And then, as you continue to progress and you get older, you start recognizing something doesn't feel right here. Like, I think I've burnt out, or I'm not comfortable in that environment anymore. It doesn't fulfill me, but even when people get to that point, they're like, well, I'm already here, so I need to just continue. To change, would require too much effort, and it makes more sense for me to live in an unfulfilled kind of way, which I know, as backwards as that sound, I think that happens more frequently than we can imagine. And so I am thankful for understanding that, hey, in order to begin a change process, which is very difficult, transitions are very difficult in life, it is imperative, I think, to first get that foundation. And that starts with understanding who you are. And that's these character strengths, and from that, you feel empowered, and you will know your relationships if your character strengths are being used adequately. And if they're not, that relationship will usually not be fulfilling for you. And the same goes for those character strengths in your job. So I think it's really important for our viewers and listeners to realize that, hey, let's keep pouring into ourselves. And as we learn more about ourselves, we'll find out that, hey, we may not be in the job that we need to be in, or we may not be in the relationship that we need to be in. But that's okay, because we are working towards getting ourselves fulfilled.
Yeah. And the idea, the VIA originally was created for youth, for younger people, to be able, because imagine
Yeah.
if you knew these things. I worked with this guy who was 26. He had his PhD. I have an industrial and organizational psychology, organizational behavior. His mother in Jamaica was a teacher who had him take all of these assessments when he was young. So he understood things about himself. He knew strengths, he knew interests, and he had a mother who was supporting and encouraging, this path. And, but he's still at that place that we worked doing, he knew and was able to really actualize a lot of his potential early, rather than through trial and error and all of these things. So what if, I know you are doing a lot of things with youth as well, and so and I think there's a lot more being done for younger people than maybe when I was young in terms of understanding these things.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, imagine, for our parents out there, you using these character strengths for your children,
Understand
safe,
to
understand them, and then empower your kids by using the words bravery, by using the words perseverance, instead of saying, great job out there today.
That's
Good
growth
job.
mindset. Yeah, that's how
Like,
great connection between how we use strengths to encourage a growth mindset, use growth mindset in developing them. Yeah, you're giving specifics rather than just the good job, which then is more like praise and might encourage me to please you rather than to develop these strengths and behaviors.
so there's an empowerment that comes with using these words, and I would highly suggest our viewers to have our kids be able to use these on your kids.
Yeah, helping them to understand them, then can guide their development of these things,
Yeah.
their fulfillment, grow, that growth mindset that you were talking about, so that they're developing character and virtue rather than, a desire to please or conform.
Right. So what are some techniques, we can use, or assessments we can use to find out a little bit more about these character strengths? I know we had talked a little bit about the VIA Institute,
Which
but
is free. There's that free online version that's really helpful. As you said, you get to see where you are kind of on all of them, what comes out at the top, what comes out at the bottom. You can think about how well am I, developing these and, personally, professionally, what might I do that I'm not doing now to be able to develop them more, to live in greater alignment with them. The VIA is one. Understanding personality, because there are strengths that come with personality. There are free online assessments for personality, getting feedback from others. In positive psychology, there was this thing that I really reflected best self, where you would it's a little bit like 360 feedback, but your community, the people you interact with, who am I when I'm at my best? What do you see? And if you gather that feedback from different sources, you're probably going to see themes and patterns begin to emerge, and those tell you as well. So definitely assessments, 360 feedback. There's so many free ones. There are other ones in organizations that we use that cost money, but anybody can do this today with the internet and with you want a good, validated, reliable survey like the VIA, where actual research and statistical analyses have gone into making sure that it truly is measuring what it says it measures.
that's right. And, again, what's great about this is that we're focusing on your good traits, your good qualities. Let's not focus on your qualities that need improvement, at least initially. I know we always it's funny, when I got that test result back, it's like I immediately looked at my worst quality
What
traits.
was at the bottom?
You know,
That's our human negativity
it's
bias. Yeah.
who cares what the good ones are? What are the bad ones? What do I need to
Our
improve upon?
negativity
Like
bias.
humor, like other things. I'm like, okay, how am I going to get those better? Because that's so much more challenging too, right? To fix something, or not fix something, but like to work on things that maybe aren't your best attributes. That takes a lot more effort, and it takes a lot more of your time and energy, you know, and you're already going through a change. So when you're going through a change, that already is tough. That's already expending a lot of energy. So let's not add to that by trying to fix things that you don't need to necessarily fix right now. It's good to be aware that, hey, these are some of the quality character strengths that maybe are not my best. You know, maybe now I can think about them as I, you know, move down, you know, my journey. But what I need to be focusing on to help that journey to transition is my
Leveraging
core
strength.
strengths. Yeah, the ones that are my top 5, you know, and I love that. And it helps empower you. It speeds things up for you, and it creates that firm foundation, because those are already been residing in you. They just been waiting to become aware into your own life. So I love that.
Yeah, I can give you an example from this morning, like working with a leader, 360 feedback and personality, right? And you're integrating them. And you know, we identified the place that maybe he needs more tools, more muscle is in managing conflict or difficult, you know, conversations, difficult personalities. And but he has huge, clear strengths in communication, in authenticity. And so those are strengths that he can completely leverage and that are going to be really helpful in developing competency in this other area. And so we never want to, what you described is what we all do, that human negativity bias. Oh, what don't we do well? That's what I need to work on. Don't lose sight of what you do well. And even when you're working on things, you know, how do you
Yes.
connect them to that? How do you leverage those strengths? Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. Let go of those negative thoughts. Our thoughts are not always true. Our emotions are temporary. Our words are powerful, you know, and all we can control are our actions and reactions. And that all starts with our foundation. And so, you know, as we're coming to the end of this podcast, are there any words of advice that you would give our audience and listeners out there on how, you know, to approach, you know, moving in more of a positive mindset and establishing foundations?
Yeah, again, positive mindset just means know yourself. Know what's important to you, what you care about. That those are your values. Know your strengths, and then you can kind of do a self-analysis. You know, and it's really easy. Am I living these in my day-to-day? And that might be personally, and it might be professionally. And take a look at that, and then what would be happening that isn't happening now that would have me say, yes, I am living these, so that you start to do that reflection, and maybe gain some insights, and then, you know, make a plan for starting to move toward those things. You know, how can you do it in the situation that you're in now, in your current role, in your current organization? How can you share that with the people around you? You know, share it with the people, you know, if it's in your job, it's important that that the people around you know these things too, like a manager, so that they can help. You know, I think the responsibility is on us as individuals to know these things so that we can also help others to understand them. And then it makes it easier for them to connect. You know, for example, with a manager can better connect your work, the opportunities that arise. Oh, this is one of Nick's strengths. You know, this is something Nick is interested in. I'm going to give this to you, Nick, and the reason that I'm giving this to you is because, you know, I know you're good at this already, but this is going to challenge that just a little bit more, so that you're growing in this area. You're probably going to be more motivated,
That's right.
to, you know, to, because you're going to actualize your skills and growth. You're going to experience flow. You know, skills meet challenge, skills,
Love that.
interests, strengths meet challenge. So I would say know for yourself these things, and help others to understand them as well. And then trying to, as much as possible, line your life up and help other people to do that as well. It could contribute to greater fulfillment in this world.
Beautifully said, Marcy. Thank you for being here with us today. And thank you for tuning into the AlignUs podcast. Until next time, stay aligned, stay connected, stay anchored into the power of unconditional love. Namaste.